you guys can, is it coming out all right, or do I need to change device?
Loud and clear.
All right, great. Good morning once again, and thank you so much for joining. As per the schedule, I'll be working with you through task A as well as task E. Coincidentally, the tasks are related. I was actually just scheduled to do one, but then I had to jump in for the other. But I was just happy that the alignment of the task is actually easy for us to then work through the two. But maybe before I jump in, I would like to hear from your side. We've got a very interesting task here. And if one looks at it, one could essentially say we've got 4 tasks that we're going to be looking at today, with a particular focus on 2 of them being on strategy. We've got accounting, and then we've got MAF. But now specifically to think about A, how did you find A? How did you find task A? Was it anything that you expected? Was it anything that was a little bit surprising? So maybe let me hear your views before I jump in and we unpack this together. Anyone who wants to share their thoughts or their journey with it? Rejoice, I see your hand. You may go ahead, please.
Hi, Rendani. Sorry, I'm putting myself out there. I'm being vulnerable. Don't crush me. Don't crush me on this one. But
I just want to listen. I just want to see.
just a disclaimer.
Wow.
I'm sensitive. Okay. So I found this. I found this tricky. For me, and I'll tell you. I'll just give you 2 reasons.
Sure.
One, because I had to disagree almost on everything with the preparer of the document, right? So when I was going through my script, I went through a script review process, and I remember the mentor who was reviewing my script said, just by looking at your script, I can tell, like, you are so nice that you struggle to tell people that they are wrong. So you need to work on that soft skill where you are comfortable telling someone that you are wrong, you are incorrect, this is incorrect. And that was one. The 2, where I found as to why I was uncomfortable, just, not really, I won't say strongly disagree, but why I was uncomfortable just articulating that, like, almost throughout my response, was in the how I communicate that someone is incorrect. So, and that for me intertwined with the ethics, where when I respond to an ethical question, I'd be worried about my tone, that I don't come across as being too harsh, or I don't come across as being too rude. And so those were the 2 areas where I found discomfort in this question, but I've worked on it because I did identify. I identified it through the script review process. So yeah, that's my take. Thanks.
All right, sure. But why did it bother you to find so many errors? Does it not help with generating points? If you are just finding things that are entirely wrong.
It does. It does. But that was the old me. This is the new me right now. I'd like to believe.
All right. I hear
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, Rejoice, for breaking the ice for us. Sunday, I see your hand is up. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, Rendani. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm well.
I still know you. I know she. But yeah, let's go.
I forgot about it. I remembered. a day or three ago. When I saw your video that you will be live, and I was like, let me just go attend the live session so we can speak about my liability, but it's okay.
Sure, sorry. Yeah.
Look,
Mm.
you see, with APC and me, I've always gotten right the accounting triggers, and the rest I struggle. This one was an accounting, one of the accounting triggers. I got a BC on it, and the other one, there was this other one where they give you a calc and then you have to review it about the lease. I got a C.
Okay,
And
that's good.
for the accounting triggers, I seem not to struggle, but I seem not. Maybe let me put it like this: I struggle a lot during pre-release if I am well vested into a standard like IFRS 16. Um, CTA, it was topical when I did CTA then. It was still new, and everyone wanted to break the eye with it. And fast forward, I came to work. Most of the companies that I happen to audit, I in every soil to rebuild. When the pre-release came, there was that joy. Oh, it's it's every 16, man. This is nice stuff. Easy. I can even tell you a summary from the back of my mind. The problem I think I struggle with is to convert whatever knowledge that I have, because whatever is said in most of the triggers, like I was attending the tax workshop, there's nothing new that they said. I got to see it on that one as well, but there's nothing new that they said that I don't know of, that somehow blew my mind to think that, okay, what that was it as well. But somehow I seem not to be able to transfer the information into an answer that is required for APC. But the things you find that you know all of them, and you still get an LC, and you struggle also to work on the progress because your brain already has the things. When you try to do that, it sounds like you are repeating things that you know. You're wasting time doing things that you don't know. That you know you should be doing things you don't know. I mean, the striking of the balance where you even technically strong on a trigger or on a section that is triggered is a bit difficult for me. I don't know.
All right, no, fair. And I think it seems for you, because usually I find that that happens under one of the two instances, where one, a candidate is not well versed with a particular standard, and therefore they need to, for a lack of a better word, overcompensate just to make sure that they find themselves there. Then you find also some that either because they're very comfortable, they get somewhat a little bit or overly confident, and just want to make sure that they get to a C and even better an HC. So it is very important for one to be able to achieve a balance in that regard. And I think maybe after we're done, one will then be able to really be able to think through on what might have been the expectation from the examiners, and therefore how will one have contained themselves in that expectation. And so I'm hoping that, yeah, maybe by the time we're done, one will then see how you can get that process right during the pre-research period. So maybe we'll touch base before we move on from here. All right. So let me take the last one from Pete. Pete, sure.
Hello?
I can hear you from my side.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, on this one, it's mixed emotions. I think I was graded BC on this one. Ne? I think my main issue here and that is I always ask myself, what is the trick here? I have this thing of always thinking, or psyche is always trying to trick me, and I get scared, And what is painful is that now when I reflect and I look at my file, the answer is there. I mean, it's there. I prepared very well, but it's just that on the day it really threw me off. And another thing is the issue of critically reviewing a policy versus the other critical reviews that we've always been performing. Like, for instance, when a critical review is done on evaluation, you know that I'm going to start from A to Z and I'm going to touch everything. But now when they say critically review a policy, the question is, where do I start and where do I end? What is the technique? How can we plan this thing going forward? Is there a strategy that we can implement now and work on so that on the day we're able to maneuver? All right, thanks.
Am I the only one who can't hear anything?
Not.
I also
Already
can't see.
requested for a few minutes. He's
Changing the PC.
Right, sorry about that. I'm back now. Struggling to use it. All right, yeah, no, thank you for those inputs. So I think yeah, I think for me, with regards to what you were just talking about, it's really about getting an approach right. Because sometimes APC, as much as technical is important, one needs to have a process that it's refined, a process that you can be able to repeat consistently and ensure that it always gets you that C. And on our first day, we did speak on a high level in terms of how does really a competent response look like? In other words, if I'm to ensure that I always have that competent response, we did speak about what we call the 9-point competency framework, where now we are saying that if you adhere to this kind of process, if you are always mindful of those things, it then becomes easier in order for you to do what? It becomes easier in order for you to consistently demonstrate competence and even be able to demonstrate that HC in those particular tasks. And yes, you will still need to bring your technical, but the systematic approach is the one that I'll want you to be mindful of. And as I said before, that whatever process you have, there might be some of the things that are working and therefore you need to continue doing. And there might be those other aspects that need to be looked into. And what I want to just demonstrate to you today is exactly that, because I don't believe you're going to get another task that is like this. But what I want you to be able to see and be able to get is to say that, what if the examiners generally expect this from me? What is it that they're expecting? And despite the technical standard that might be triggered and therefore examined, how do I consistently show up, achieve those C's, and make sure that I am comfortable when it comes to what? When it comes to accounting. And the approach, I think it also takes into some consideration that some of you have got that SEMA background, and the kind of comprehension, the kind of detail and thoroughness of navigating between the standard. You therefore need to have a more of a really structured approach in order to be able to get it right, in order to have some kind of a checklist in your mind, in order to be in order to have that consistent comfort. So that's just my objective today, to say that, yes, if you then leave this particular session and you are still unclear about some of the IFRS 16 session, don't think that you've missed the mark. But what I want you to do is to be able to say, what if I get another IFRS 16 and the context is entirely different? How will I apply myself? What if it's not even if it's 15, it's 16, it's not 16, but it's 15, it's this or that. How do I consistently achieve that? So that is how I'll want you to be able to think about our journey today. And as a start, I've prepared this document here. I don't have slides. I found that the slides will really derail some of the things that I need to communicate. But I'm hoping that the process that we're going to be taking, you'll still be able to follow and have key takeaways. So for me, and I think sometimes is to acknowledge that I do have the benefit of hindsight here, because I am sitting for this outside exam constraints. I am sitting for this with a full set of documents. But one of the things that I explained to you last time when we met is to just simply say that, for me, what I believe, and this is something that sometimes the education system is all about, to say that there is always a pattern to things, and having a recognition of that pattern and having a process to deal with that pattern, it's really what will ensure your success. So essentially here, I spoke to you about those 9 competencies, and I then had to apply them to say that, wait, what if I was lying to these candidates before? What if what I was saying is not entirely true? Can it be consistently tested and it really then proves to be effective? And this is my view. I've then taken those 9 competencies that we've spoken about, and I've then put them here to say, what is it that I expected in each and every aspect? So to say that, what will then have constituted a good approach? What will then be critical thinking be all about here? What about business acumen? How do you, or will you be expected to adapt to changes on the day? And when I tested this against the official marking grid, against the solution, I then found that, yes, this will not have only given me a C, but it will have given me an HC. And that's what I want to help you get there. I want you to be excited about getting to HC. Do you want the HC, or you just want to see? There's no normal C student here, right? I'm thinking. So I'm going to share this with you, but what I'm going to do throughout the session is to really unpack it, to say that, because I think the question I got from the likes of Pearl and we spoke about with Pete last time, how does business acumen look like in the context of an accounting task? That was one of the questions. How does technical, or what will be expected? Were there some elements of ethical leadership here? What about what it means to apply that research? So we are going to unpack this through our discussion. But the way we're going to approach it, we're going to spend time analyzing the IOD. And be mindful to say that when the examiner said this, how did we need to respond? What did we need to think about? So that is going to be what? That is going to be the approach that we're going to be taking today. And I see some comments. HC all the ways. Great. So then let me go to my IOD. Here we go. So the IOD, one of the things that I think I had a comment, I'm not sure it was from, just after Kahlego just concluded, just around what? Around the work in the PRI. So the PRI, Chandra did prepare quite a nice short video on it, highlighting some of the aspects that were coming through. And now we are going to assume that everyone got that, right? Everyone watched that, but on a high level, they had triggered and mentioned their plans of entering into what they call a wet lease agreement. And in that particular set of documents, they then gave us a high-level agreement. And if that was enough in order to do what? To make everyone be on the same page with regards to what is a wet lease agreement. But one might say, but I was not there and I needed to do a little bit of work. And one of the things that you'll remember I said when we started is that in the PRI period, we need to get two things right: the context as well as the technical. And those things need to be married. So yes, they had given you a high level idea of what is a wet lease. But if you had gone with only that, without trying to marry it to the technical, that will have been a little bit of what? Of an issue. And if you had then layered the technical without a full comprehension of a wet lease agreement, that will have also been not the best of what approach. So you needed to bring the two together, the context as well as the technical. And maybe some of you can share. By the time you came in, because I remember speaking to one of the candidates, and I was a little bit worried because they said when they went in, they really didn't understand clearly in their mind how and what is this wet lease agreement. And maybe if you can share your journey in terms of how did, for those that felt and can say that they were comfortable with the wet lease agreement, how did you bridge that gap? And maybe just to hear about some of the techniques that some of you implemented and were effective. How did you bridge that gap to say that you can ask me anything about a wet lease agreement and I know and I'll be able to unpack it for you? Well, what was some of the process that you undertook? Rachel, I see your hand is up. Sure.
Am I audible?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly on my side.
Okay. So First of all, I only managed to get to the point. I'm still sort of pushing, after my reflection. So the biggest mistake that I did, when I did this paper last year, I'm gonna repeat, is that, we'd go through the similar things. I went and I Googled what a wet lease is and what a dry lease is to see all of that.
Yeah.
And I went with the context of this being completely an accounting question, obviously, because in my mind, I was then Googling the information for me to fit it into IFRS 16 to say, okay, so then this is looking like this. How is it going to look for IFRS 16? As opposed to what they're currently doing at dry lease, how then does it look? So then for me, contextualizing that and saying, okay, it makes sense. So in case in the in the IOD, they ask me about a wet lease, but they throw in something about a dry lease. But what I did not pick up, and I failed to pick up in the pre-release, because they were trying to make a decision, which means it's not completely an accounting question. When we look at it holistically, yes, they want to see the reporting or financial reporting aspects of it. However, because they are still trying to make a decision, I need to then understand the pros and cons and the ins and outs of these things that they're presenting to me and look at it from a holistic or multidisciplinary sort of view, right? So that is why then I wasn't able to answer everything in that question when I did it the first time. I did the accounting part very well. However, I then slacked on the other part where I needed to answer, because then I looked at it as a silo, right? That was the biggest mistake that I had done. So how I then advised myself, or maybe what the nugget that I picked up is going forward, every time when well, it's really not really well, it's really why these papers are said, right? I have to come and add the value. So every time when they want me to provide advice or provide something, it means it's from a holistic perspective. So the only reason why then I couldn't answer that question properly is because I didn't do proper research with that in mind. I was then boxing myself and looking at things in silos. So that's yeah, how I viewed it, as opposed to when I did it now again. I did it with the mindset of saying they want to know from a holistic perspective. They gave me the definitions to say this is a wet lease, this is a dry lease, right? I didn't have to do much research, right? What I needed to do, I needed to see and ask myself, what did they want? They want to make a decision to go wet lease. It's still a decision, whether it's accounting or not, right? I need to look at it holistically, and hence, yeah, I managed to do a little bit better on the second attempt of a rework.
Okay. Maybe just to just summarize it for me. So, where does I heard you talking about the dry lease in your consideration or your process. Where are you saying it fit in? Just to make sure I'm with you. How did the dry lease that they already have versus this fit into that process? Yeah.
Okay, so in the process of research, I didn't necessarily go in depth of what a dry lease is, because they already given us that information. But
and you understood that part. You saying you were
Yes.
happy with that.
Yes, I was happy with that.
Is it both from a strategic perspective and also an accounting perspective, just to understand?
So, okay. So
Yeah.
from an accounting perspective, yes. But from a strategic perspective, I had to understand both things. But then there is that little thing. I have this analysis paralysis, which wastes time. So I had to get over that. I had to understand how far do I need to understand what a dry lease is and how far I need to understand what a wet lease is. But what I discovered also is Google can only tell you the differences between the two. What you need to do is you need to contextualize it to the company and say, okay, based on what I have, the information I have, and based on what they need to decide, what is then the pros and cons, what is the risks, disadvantages, and all of that. So I had to understand both a dry lease and a wet lease, but up to a certain point, right? What I'm trying to say, Rendani, is I didn't do that the first time. I didn't do that properly the first time, and hence I slacked on the decision-making part.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Sure. Got you. Thank you. Ryan, sure.
Morning, Rendan.
Morning.
Yeah, on my side with my preparation, I managed to prepare in the way that I thought it was the best. Coming from the SEMA background, accounting is not my strongest.
Okay, interesting.
Though
Well, how
I'm
does
good in
that
accounting, but the fact, right. So for me, I was not attending with Endunam, I was attending somewhere.
Sure.
But the idea was it was mainly on the holistic approach of an accounting task. So the approach that I'm adopting is for me to go and so much into not be having time. So I used like Deloitte, KPMG articles for me to
So I'm
be
losing you
able
some
to
time.
get
Now it's not
summarized
just me, right?
versions of the standards and such the.
Ryan,
Can I try again?
You were breaking more very recently. Just after you said you were considering the Deloitte, I think PwC reports or documents. That's as far as I got.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
Yes. Can I try again now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so I was using those documents for my research and practical examples. For me to be able to, in a shorter version of it, as opposed to go to the real standard from scratch.
Okay.
Then my challenge was, with that approach, I was able to answer a question that is more of an accounting question from the figures perspective, not actually breaking it down to say this is classification, subsequent measurement, things. I don't, as opposed to break it down to those aspects to say this is my classification, measurement, subsequent measurement, and all the disclosures. So when they come and say classification, one would now struggle to say, how can I link it to those practical questions that I was getting to say what falls under classification, what falls under initial measurement and stuff like that. So I did not really link that very well. And I struggled and I ended up getting a BC, of which that task, to be honest, when I look at the solution, I was having everything with me, but it's only that I took more like a shortcut to get the full understanding within a short space of time, instead of me breaking down into like classification measurement. That's where I missed the point. But I managed to get a BC, which was fair enough. And I'm looking forward to improve further into that. Thanks.
All right, cool. And I think you're raising a very important point around approach. Okay, great. All right. Let me take Kosinati and John, then we'll jump in.
Danny, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Okay, I'm well, thanks.
Great.
So on my end, from the preparation side, I said whether wet lease or dry lease is just IFRS 16. So what I did now is I went to identified ourselves as we are lessees in this lease, because we are leasing so I went to the content page of IFRS 16, and from the definition and the initial recognition up to presentation and disclosure. So that's how I prepared, trying to link it to the context of OTA. So now on the day, what threw me off now is the CFO was saying this is an operating lease and we are a lessor. So yeah, for me now to come back now to try to introduce the lessee part now and try to articulate everything on the lessee part, I thought maybe it's going into the rabbit hole. So for me now, I've applied a very limited, I got all the stuff in the file, but now to apply that lessee part of recognizing right of use asset and lease liability, yes, I wrote and I got a BC, but I didn't apply myself enough, because for me, I was saying now, the CFO is talking about operating lease and lessor. How can I now bring all the stuff of the lessee part from the initial, from the definition up to the to disclosure in this? How can I fit all this junk, all this stuff into the? Is it not theory dumping? So how best can I articulate it? So I ended up using the lessee part, but on a limited approach. I just said, okay, let me just include this on the on this task. So I ended up getting a BC, but I had prepared both the technical and the technical accounting and the SRMG part, because during research I researched the advantages of dry lease over wet lease and the advantages of wet lease over dry lease. I considered that. So yeah, that's where I struggled. I had the stuff in the file, but now to put it, I thought maybe I'll be duplicating the standard in the exam. So that's where my fear came from, and I just used a little bit and ended up getting a BC. So now so because of these reflections, I've managed now to know the approach, and now I'm a better person now.
You're a better person. I like that. All right. I like that. Yeah, it sounds like the lies got you a little bit crossed in terms of, wait, what's happening? Why? And say shame. I also received such comment to say the inaccuracy was just too significant to manage. And I think for some that's what was the problem. That how could you get it so wrong? And it felt like for some it also questioned them to say that no, they could not have. Okay, could I be missing something when I'm coming here and someone now just starts talking about these things, and I'm saying that sure, did I miss something? Why will then the CFO get it just so wrong? And I think for me, I was also surprised to say, but wait, what is happening? And I know that, yeah, for some that threw them off, and it sounds like you as well, because you are not saying that I want to just disregard what you're saying and just tell you the right stuff, but I am afraid that I'll just be dumping. So how do I navigate through the task? So that's that is the issue that I also had. So I see some hands. Maybe let me just take John's one, then we'll pause it, just catch up, and then we will come back to those questions. John?
Thanks, Rendano. For me, like the others have already said, I think the preparation was good. I managed to, get the what is the wet, wet lease and the dry lease and examples thereof. But the issue was on the day, I think as many say that it came otherwise, that now you needed to disagree and maybe come with the correct treatment of the lease. So I think it was very much difficult for us to go as down as maybe mentioning the definitions, the scopes, and what, considering that the person whom we are responding to is the CFO. So we have that maybe understanding to say some of the stuff might be already known by the CFO. So for us going that now basic, it will be like maybe we're dumping the information in that paper. But what is my worst nightmare in this task? I think a special accounting task. I've been doing my reflections. I think I have a serious challenge with this one in terms of how far should I go when I'm responding to this task. Where do I start? Do I start from the definition until the presentation and disclose? What is the limit in terms of giving the information? And yeah, because I think since I started with the professional training in terms of preparing for APC, I've never gotten a C from this task from an accounting task. So I think the issue continues with even this one. I think I also got chance to write in the previous year, and I also got BC. So I don't know where am I losing it. I'm hoping that maybe by the end of this session, I will get exactly where my issue is. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much for that, for sharing that, John. So I'm also hoping that some of the approach will share. Hopefully, it will help you to really unpack and have some kind of an approach that will be able to help you going forward. All right. So the question that I hear. So let me just park them, and let's just unpack some of them PRI a bit. So you have gone through the PRI, but one of the things that when I saw the PRI, as much as we are now all here, and we are now saying that maybe we suspected and we prepared for IFRS 16, I just want to pause on that to say that what made it an IFRS 16 specifically? In other words, were there some doubts in your mind that this could be something other than an IFRS 16 kind of question? Did anyone go there? Because when I looked at this, I was like, sometimes we underestimate the power of hindsight to say that now that we know better that it was an IFRS 16. But what I want you to be aware of is that your process has to be so thorough enough and critical enough to say what made this a lease. Because it's very important. Even so, because your CFO simply told you that it was a lease. But could it have been something else? Was there an opportunity for this? Or was there something that made you to then say, I now know it's a lease? Is there something that was at the back of your mind that you said it was not enough based on the PRI for me to conclude it's a lease? And here, that is where then the power of context and further research will have helped you. So for those that then came to understand that a wet lease, what we were told is that a wet lease, what happens is that the lessor or the supplier, let's call them the supplier for now, the supplier gives you everything. Did you then consider what is it that makes such an arrangement a lease? Was the supplier not the one that were now simply offering a service of airline to your customers? So I just want to throw that into the thinking process to say, what made this a lease for you? At what point did it become a lease? Because it was, to some extent, I was like, I want to use this particular context in our future APC program because I'm going to create a question that is not a lease. And I just want to see if candidates are there enough to say that this thing was not a lease in the PRI, it only became a lease in the IOD. What was that clear enough to everyone? Or maybe someone talks to me that was there someone who had in their what if to say that this might not be a lease? And what were you waiting for? Just that one thing, what is it that you were waiting for? And this is what I was saying, that context will have then been able to help you to say what? To help you to say, because of what I've read, then I can assess it now and it is a lease. But maybe based on my understanding, in your research, did you consider that maybe this supplier has got a number of aircrafts? There they are, the number of aircrafts. Then for those that probably are frequent flyers, they might not be surprised to say that I have flown with, say, ComAir, but when I got there, the aircraft we got in was not a ComAir aircraft, but still the supplier or the airline provided the service that I needed, which is to be flown from point A to B. And if then there is such a thing, in this wet lease agreements, did we consider that this supplier might have a number of airlines or aircrafts, and then based on the schedule, that based on next week's booking, they can bring aircraft number 1, based on the schedule, bring aircraft number 2, aircraft number 3, as long as we've got an agreement together. Did someone got there? Because if then we got there, then it will have challenged whether this was a lease or not. Because now it means that the supplier, or maybe let me just hear from you, just one person.
Lauren Dani.
Hi.
So in our research, we did not conclude that it was a lease. However, we had applied the lease definition to the information that we had and identified then what would be missing. So the approach was we need clear content. So there are some points within the lease definition that you could conclude that, okay, this is probably an identified asset. Okay, but then there are some points in the lease definition that could go other way. Like for instance, if you go and research, there could be possibility of substantive substitution rights, depending on whether the branding is there or not. So things like that would have given me a clear understanding. If maybe that thing is branded in under my name, then it would be difficult for the supplier to substitute it. But I needed to see on the day if there's something like that. So on the day, there were things like branding and all of that. And then I concluded, okay, this one is definitely a lease for me. So there are some things in the lease definition that could have concluded like it was going to be difficult for you to conclude otherwise on the day. But there are some things that were like a little bit shaky that you could say, okay, if this goes south or this goes west, it could turn out not to be a lease, because at the end of the day, it needed to meet the entire lease definition for us to say, okay, it's a lease. But I mean, some people could argue otherwise. I just find it's very risky for us to conclude things on a pre-release basis unless it's very clear. And then when we get to IOD, that's when things go south. So, I mean, it was really leaning towards it being a lease, but we said, there are certain things that are quite subjective in there. If it goes like this, then it's not a lease. And you ask yourself, what are the chances that it could go like this? So we find in that control definition in the lease, that control issue, you know, where we have control of the asset, that's where we had questions amongst each other. So that by definition made us say, okay, let's just consider that this could go either way.
All right, sure. So what I was trying to just get to is that the big uncertainty for me was the idea of substantive substitution rights. Yes, this is something that can be resolved through further research during the PRI period. But one of the things that Rachel is talking about, she's talking about branding. And if you tell me about branding, initially, I'm not convinced that branding is something that is so significant unless I do further research. Because to me, I might be thinking that these are just stickers that you paste like in any other instances. If it's, and maybe the cost of doing so might not be significant enough to deter, say, a supplier from saying that this month I'm going to brand this airline to this. Come December, I will be able to provide a bigger aircraft to, say, SAA because it's busy season. So right now, on the 16th of November up to the 21st of November, I could just brand any of my airlines and then be able to supply it to SAA come the 1st of what? Come the 1st of December. Then in that month, they've got a bigger aircraft and I'm able to charge them more. So what I was just trying to just get to here is that I want that process of yours to be thorough enough to be able to be challenged by the practicality or lack of practicality thereof. To say that things that you were thinking about, to say this makes this a lease, were they there? And if they were not there, we said that these are some of the uncertainties that we are hoping that what the examiner will resolve on the day. So for me, what bothered me was this part, that I wanted to know whether the supplier had substantive substitution rights, because branding for me was just not enough. I was not convinced that it was a costly exercise. I was not convinced that it is something that the supplier cannot be able to do in a relatively short period of time. So what that then will help you to do when you've got, and these uncertainties, firstly, they should not make you uncomfortable, but they should help you to be more open when then views are later expressed, to say that, oh, but wait, I was on the fence with this thing. Now, if this thing is not resolved, then I am in a position to then engage with the examiners on it. I am in a position to raise it. I'm in a position to consider it, and hopefully this is what the examiners will give me credit for. So this was one of those, to say I had this uncertainty. Then number two is that if now I am going with the general view that there's IFRS 16, then my next approach was, number one, what makes this from an accounting perspective different from a wet lease? In other words, which aspects do I need to be mindful of accounting for? Because they've already told me that they're leasing 4 aircrafts, and now they're telling me this is their first one. And one of the things about it, I need to therefore say what, practically speaking, has changed that will necessitate a different accounting approach. Because this will now make me to be surprised if the CFO or any of the finance team are getting it wrong. They should be getting wrong only the incremental aspects. And if they are not getting wrong only the incremental aspects, then it should not only worry me about this accounting, but it should worry me about the existing accounting. Does that make sense? Because they're already doing this thing. So what is changing? It seems that what is changing is we've got a dry lease and we put this non-lease components, the services, and it then becomes a wet lease. But those things that have been put in my mind, I would then think that's what then created this accounting task, that everything else should therefore remain the same. And when I go to IFRS 16, I am then focused on those particular aspects that may be different. So this was something that during my pre-release, or what I would have wanted you to consider, was exactly that. Does that make sense? To say, I've got a dry lease, they've been doing it since they've been incorporated, and now they are getting a wet lease, and this, it looks like just another lease agreement, except for the additional services. So therefore, I need to understand that we should not be complicating this much more than what it really is from an accounting, and just a question of how do these additional aspects complicate my life. Does that logic make sense? Because now it will inform me and also make the existing financials to be relevant. I will then use them as a guideline to say, let me go to the SFP. What do you have? Oh, I need to have these aspects. So when I come in and I find that the CFO is doing things that are even not in the current financials, I will have been very surprised. I will have been very, very surprised to say, what are you now doing? Because we have this, and I thought we are now just confused about these additional services. Are we clear about that logic? And also then the power that it will help us to narrow and direct our thinking. Okay, sure. So now, if we are then accepting that we now have a lease, and this is just a lease with additional components, I will then say that what are the stages of a lease? A lease has got initial or commencement. Initial recognition, which is around the commencement. Then it has subsequent. Then it has subsequent recognition. And then it has what? Then it has the end of the lease, which can be two of them. They could be renewals, and they could be then the ultimate end, which sometimes could include a purchase of the asset. Then there's also, what do you call it? There's also the presentation and disclosure. So if now we are to talk about this, we will need to agree, CFO, that we have to address all these aspects. We have to address all these aspects. And again, I've got an existing dry lease. How does it look like for a dry lease? And therefore, how do I expect it to be different for a wet lease? So if we are to apply that mindset, where did you then, or what will you consider to be the difference between dry lease and wet lease accounting? What will you consider to be the difference? One, because this is the kind of work that we might be able to do before the PRI. So before the IOD, that we could then start thinking about that. What kind of differences do we expect? So let's start with initial recognition. From an initial recognition, what aspects will we need to be mindful of? One, that will say, or maybe we can talk about similarity as well. So let me say similarities as well as differences. So what will be similar and what will be different from an initial measurement perspective? So I see some points, no components for the dry lease. So similar, let's start with similar. I will expect there to have a right of use, a right of use asset, and a lease liability. And then difference, what will it be? from an initial recognition difference will be what? So the non-list components, or let's say more than the flight, the aircraft, more than the aircraft. That is the additional services. Okay? Because we are just talking about this to say, all right, we are now expecting this as the what? As the additional aspects. What more could then be around here? What additional aspects will need to be considered? I know we are at initial recognition. We are at initial because we need to build an approach of questions, unpacking questions and giving us clarity. So here we are, but is this the only difference? I want you to get up from a hindsight perspective, because now you might say, I'm talking about the things I've seen, but let's say you are now doing this again, and we are saying this task might potentially change. What are the aspects that you might say, I had thought about it, but they didn't feature here? So what additional aspects will we then expect to exist? Is this it, or there's more? So talk to me about the list terms. What will make a list term for a dry list to be different from a list term for a wet list? Shorter versus long term. How are you getting to shorter versus long term? Someone maybe jump in. Because remember, we are at initial, and we are just unpacking our thinking to say, if I was sitting here, what are the fundamental reasons for entering into a wet list? Because as Rachel told us, there is a decision. But we are saying that this decision should fundamentally change how we are doing things. Otherwise, this thing might not make a difference. In your view, and based on what you've read, what makes a wet list attractive that from an initial recognition, you might need to be mindful of? So far, we have seen that there are additional services, which we therefore need to deal with at initial recognition. But what else could therefore need to be dealt with? Pete, yes.
Risk and rewards, maybe.
No, you know I'm not going to accept that, right? We are at APC. APC, we are professional. We are no longer just candidates. So unpack that for me. Yes.
I was looking at in terms of who insures the aircraft at this point. So looking at the terms of and conditions of leasing, I'm thinking who insures the aircraft, and therefore that determines who has the risk.
But is that not going to fall under additional services? Or will it be something different? Or maybe I'm not getting you. Because I'm saying that we are busy now in our pre-research period. We are getting ready for the discussion with our boss, with our examiners. And we are then saying that the first thing, obviously, we don't want to waste our boss's time by telling them something that we've been doing. Yes, we've just been appointed at OTA recently. And we are then saying that, oh, there's already been a team that has been doing this. So if I'm now involved in this particular project or in this particular work stream, I need to be thinking about the difference so that I can then bring it to the to the team's consideration. So first of all, I then thought about similarities of right of use asset will be there, lease liability will be there, And the difference is I then need to make sure that if I'm to talk with my CFO, I need to be able to understand how to do this. But we are still crafting our thought process. We're going to get to unpacking. But now we are saying we can't be outside the context. We need to remember to be within the context. So how do we bring our understanding of the strategic rationale of entering into a word list has any bearing on the accounting? So far, we are saying that it might because there are additional services. Is there anything else? Is there anything else? So remember, we want to marry the technical with context. So let's get that marriage together. Yes.
Okay. Randad, I was thinking, because now, as in terms of our strategy, we are saying we no longer want to incur a lot of fixed costs. We want to do this thing for a short period of time, and we want to test the market. And I think the issue of a list term again would be a factor.
Yes.
Because
So
now,
yes, and maybe let me pause you there. Sorry, I'm gonna just pause you there because you are now bringing business acumen that we are entering this with two objectives: one, to manage our cost, and to ensure flexibility. And when it comes to strategic consideration, those were the two strategic considerations you needed to unpack. So understand that this is a cost and flexibility issue. That's what a wait list does. That's it. If after you've done all your research, I needed you to come with these 2 points to say that I now understand a wait list gives us flexibility as well as help us to manage our cost. That's it. That's why companies look for wait list agreement. So from a cost perspective, you have told me someone who's going to do what? Give you a list with all the services. And now when you were just explaining, you have now told me that flexibility can affect how we think about the list term for accounting purposes. So that's where now you are bringing your understanding of the context, your business acumen to an accounting issue. Are we clear for those that were saying, how do I bring those two together? Is it making sense? And remember, these are the things that we can do in our pre-release period. Does this make sense? Great. So now I am sitting again. I've not moved. I'm still at the PRI. And I'm saying that now we have now come to understand the context to say that at initial recognition, I've got a dry list, which gives me this, and I've seen these aspects on the financials. Now I'm entering into a wait list, and the wait list has got two components: cost management and flexibility. Now, let's talk about the triggering of the accounting or the technical aspects. Because now we are saying we don't have the luxury of going through the entire standard, but it will be very, very unfortunate of us to go into the assessment without having dealt with these two aspects. So now let's talk about what then the existence of additional services does from an accounting perspective. So now we jump into IFRS 16. So what is the thinking when it comes to these additional services? Which principles do we need to be mindful of? Which principles? Remember that we are not recognizing the hindsight. We are not taking that we now know what they're going to give us. We are still saying, let's further unpack this PRI so that when we think about one of the competencies that says apply our pre-research work, then examiners and our CFO will say, this candidate here, this professional deserves a promotion. This one deserves a C outcome. So we are thinking and unpacking these things before the context. So now, this additional service, what are the principles? What are the principles? Okay. What are the principles? Yes. Anyone who wants to jump in? What are the principles with regards to additional services? So,
I think
yes,
one of the principles is that you can actually combine them as a leasee, and then instead of breaking them into expense portion and the right of use asset portion, you can treat them all together as a lease component. I'm not sure if I'm going down the wrong boat.
You are not, but it just feels you are skipping a step. You refer to them, you refer to them as them. But remember, what is them to you might not be clear to me. What is them? So start there. Start there.
Okay, I'll say that. Oh, sorry.
Sure, go.
I wanted to say the lease component.
But that's just one thing. Yeah, maybe go. Let go. Let's stop with the one-word answers. Yes, let's stop with that.
So when you are making this payment, let's say maybe you are paying 1 million rand. This million rand is for two services: to get the aeroplane that is going to fly the passengers, and then it is also for the other components like the pilots and the staff and all those things. So I'm not sure if that's correct.
So when they are there, those other services, let's now say we've got a name for them, right? So the aircraft, we are saying we are not overly stressed about it because we are saying that the aircraft, we are thinking that this is not different from a dry lease. So now these other services, what does the standard say about those? Does it say anything? Yes. Does it say anything? So let's take our standards with us. Sorry, is there someone talking?
Yes. It's Sunday.
All right, Sunday, yes.
You see, you just raised the accounting in me, with this question. With the other non-lease components that are coming within this contract.
Yeah.
The standard speaks of applying a practical expedient, in a sense that you would need to elect from the underlying asset which of those are to be separated from the lease, from the lease and the non-lease components, and it went on to speak of when should you not apply that practical expedient, to what extent. And okay, that's just the theory of it in general, the accounting. Coming back to the scenario.
But wait, you are also skipping a step. Yes, we are skipping a step. Like these things, when will they need to be considered for separation? Should we just see a service and consider for separation? Yes.
So, Ren, I don't know if I'm going as far back as you would like me to go, but the standard, when it speaks about components for a lessee, it says that we need to assess whether something is a lease component or a non-component based on the similar principles in IFRS 15, where we see if something is capable of being distinct or separable. So that's, I think, where I would start.
Yes, our journey needs to start there because all this other stuff requires that. So we need to go to B32 to determine whether the right to use an underlying asset can be considered separately, because we need to know whether there is a need to separate or this is just the same thing. And what I want you to get to, and yes, one could say, I've got the solution, they didn't do that and so on. But I want you to be able to say in the PRI, be thorough enough to then drive the breakdown of how the standards look like. Does that make sense? Because I don't want you to then have a process that skips the step and you are now surprised, what are they talking about? How was I supposed to think about this before? Because now we are sitting here and saying that, firstly, if we talk about separating aspects, they need to be tested whether they can be separated or not, or otherwise these things are just one thing. Because the same way an aircraft, for the second task, we are busy breaking it into its components. But for the first task, you might say, why didn't we test whether the engine is a separate component, the seats and all these things? But now we come to task B, and that seems to be the issue. So we need to then have thought that through, because thinking about that will have just given us the edge to be able to think differently about how to really unpack this. So the issue here that I want you to just make sure you are thinking about is to say that, should I be thinking about separating this or not? Because I should not be thinking about the practical expedient if there's no first the need to separate these aspects. So for them to be separated, B32 of IFRS 16 has to have been ticked off. And remember, I am doing this at what? Pre-research stage. I don't know what furthermore they will give me. Does that make sense? Because this I will not have needed to do with just a dry lease. But I now need to do, because I've got what? I've got a lease that has more than a couple of things. But are these even separate things to begin with? Are they even distinct? Are we all clear? Okay, so now we have tested this in the PRI. And the question is, would you have told the examiners about it before you started unpacking the separation? So in the PRI, I think one could be able to argue and say maintenance, one can clearly see it as a distinct service, because the customer can benefit. They told us previously that this is one of their key costs. They've got a separate service provider. And we know the IFRS 15 says that if the service is provided by a third party, then it's capable of being distinct. And because it's not supplied at the same time as an aircraft, then clearly it can be separately identified. So we, during the PRI, can be able to see that there are several distinct items in this in this agreement, because we'll just call it an agreement. We can clearly see. So that is the first thing that we will have needed as a team to agree on. Now that we are agreeing that they are separate aspects, we now need to talk about separation, because some relate to the use of an identified asset and some to not. And the idea here is just they didn't complicate it further, but the idea of this assessment is that there might be items that are not distinct and will be considered as part of the aircraft. So that is what we needed to do, to say all those things that they listed in the PRI. If one of them we consider it not to be distinct, it has to be combined with the aircraft and considered to be one thing. And if it's one thing, there's no need to talk about separating it from the lease component, because then that is just the entire payment that it will relate to. So that's why this assessment needed to be done. But all right, now we are saying what? We are saying we are concluding that there appear to be several distinct items. Now, let's now talk about how to separate.
So, Rendani, I have
Yes.
a question on that. I think one of the things I struggled with was, I don't know, maybe it's because of the thing that you're saying, we're skipping steps. When I did the assessment, the one thing that was clear that there's an asset that is an identified asset that you can, corroborate using the standard. But the other items now, did I also need to go through the lease definition for them to say, okay, is this an identified asset or whatever? Because most of them didn't even meet the definition of an asset according to the framework. So I was like, okay, so if it's not an asset itself, I didn't have to discuss whether is it part of the lease or not. So I didn't know whether I'm actually supposed to be doing that, or the standard already tells me if there's other things that are attached to the lease, just go straight to the component discussion. Don't waste your time in seeing whether it's an asset, identified asset or not. Does it form part of the lease or not? So that's where I sort of got stuck. I mean, confused.
So to just clarify this requirement, right? So this requirement is saying that there is an aircraft, which we might be able to agree that there it is. But what we want to understand is these things that have been added, can they really be separated from the asset first in terms of whether they are distinct or not? Because if they cannot be separated, then it is just the aircraft. There are no non-lease components to consider for separation. Do you understand? Because the next principle is, if they are, then should they be separated? If they are non-lease components, should be yes. So that's where, because sometimes it sounds as if it's the same thing, but that's where when you initially responded, you then said the guidance comes from IFRS 15. And IFRS 15, that's the one that talks about consumer benefits and separately identifiable.
Got you. Yes.
Sure. So now we are agreeing that these items are distinct. Now let's move on to say, how do we then separate them? Or what are the principles around separation? And that's where Sunday was taking us. Yes. Sure.
Just a question. I think it's what confused me as well during that time was to say, must this cost be capitalized to the aircraft itself, or there must be capitalized to the right to use? Like you can see on the slide, you said ideally there might be items that are distinct and will be considered as part of the aircraft. Is it part of the aircraft, or is it part of the right to use the aircraft that we are capitalizing to?
Yes, so because they are considered to be part of the aircraft, from an accounting perspective, they now form, so their payment for them becomes a lease payment, and therefore it forms part of the right of use. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Now, Sunday was now talking to us about what? Sorry, someone's mic is open. So now Sunday was talking to us about paragraph 12 of IFRS 16, which then say, for a contract that is or contains a lease, an entity shall, for each lease component within the contract, shall account for each lease component within the contract as a lease separately from the non-lease component. So now the standard is saying we need to account for separately. Now let's talk about this. What does accounting for separately mean? What do I need to do? So we've got then the what? We've got the aircraft, and we are saying that this is a lease component. Now these are the services. When it says account separately, what does it mean? What did you read that to mean? What did you read that to mean?
I don't know.
Hi.
Good. When it says accounted separately, it speaks of the other requirements that has got to do with the non-lease component as a start. It speaks to what other requirements of the accounting for those particular non-lease component that are there within the lease component. And then I don't know if I'm moving too fast, but it also speaks of getting a standalone selling price, like the same way as in IFRS 16, when you got when you allocating price, that process, it also wants you to get a standalone selling price of each of the item, and then you allocate the standalone selling price based on that. But that's a principle that is deep in IFRS 15. In IFRS 16, around the standalone around the separating of component, what happens there, they just mention it, not in detail to say how to actually break it down.
All right. Yes, but let's conclude paragraph 12. Then you'll conclude the unit of account. Yeah, let's conclude if it's 12, yes, if it's 16, paragraph 12, and then let's go to the other. So here, it's what you just said to us, that here for the aircraft, the lease component will still be in IFRS 16, and here will be in other standards. So because you just want to walk through the process. So this point is done, because you want to say, examiner, I am clear about what this all means. I'm not going to skip a step. I'm going to be thorough enough so that I don't worry about the depth in my response. But now, again, other standard is a little bit generic. We've got the item. So let's say we are talking about maintenance. Which standard will you want to refer to here? Oh, yes, which standard? Because you've got now an example of the cost. So maybe let's start picking standards. Yes.
IS 16.
IS 16, okay.
Where you see that standard that talks about componentization, where if, for instance, the asset has got different useful life, like in this, the contract of this is I can say the airplane has got an engine, and then the body of the airplane maybe it's depreciated over 50 years, but the engine is only 5 years and must comply with the South African Civil Aviation Authority. So that's why you would have to separate the two so that you can depreciate them separately. So that was my understanding here.
Okay.
So, but
right.
with yes.
Okay, I'm with you. Excuse me. Yeah. So okay, I'm with you. So here you've got these other components. You can think about it. Yeah, IFRS 16, if you apply the recognition criteria, could have landed at the same point, or simply just using what? Simply just using the framework. All right. So that's what we are understanding. But the standard then says, still in paragraph 12, unless the entity applies the practical expedient in paragraph what? In paragraph 15. So we might want to see what paragraph 15 tells us to do. So let's look at 15. It says, as a practical expedient, a lessee may elect by class of underlying asset not to separate non-lease components from lease components, and instead account for each lease component and any associated non-lease component as a single lease component. A lessee shall not apply this to embedded derivatives that meet the criteria in IFRS 9. So now let's talk. We are now saying that we can account for this separately. We can. Then we are now also having this practical expedient. How will you bring it in for the examiner? How will you bring it into the examiner? Or for the examiner, yes. So do you tell the examiner about it? Or do you tell them what to do? Yeah, like just tell them, because when there's something like this, how do you unpack it for the examiner? How do you unpack it for the examiner? Anyone, just jump in, please.
Okay,
Sure.
Look, I may be taking this a bit too far. I don't know, to HC level, but I think the starting point of this would be to actually mention to the audience in the scenario that we would need to consider our accounting policy around lease and non-lease component when we apply them, because remember, it looked like it's an election to apply the practical expedient. I think a starting point, I may need to actually start saying we would need to look at our accounting policy. What does it say around non-lease components on a lease? Then went on to say, if the accounting policy is silent on that, then I will then bring a suggestion to either include or exclude. Remember, there's no right or wrong answer, but as long as I'm still within my, as long as I'm well within my what's this, guys? You forgive me, I'm not good in English. As long as I'm within the standards, let me put it like that.
All right, cool. So maybe let me put a full stop there. So the people that are in Sunday's team, talk to Sunday. Let me just hear you talk to him. You are in his team.
Hello?
Yes. You are not talking to me, you are not talking to the CFO, you're talking to Sunday.
Okay, Sunday, I would I just would want to know. So I agree with you up to a point where we say then we need to then advise, but we have I think the context for us to be able to advise whether we need to take the practical expedient or not. So I would then say maybe based on the context of what a wet lease is and what we want to use it for. If we are planning on not using a wet lease for a extended period, it would generally maybe not be advisable to have a lot of things sitting in our balance sheet. I'd say it's a little bit more admin intensive, I guess. So maybe how about we then decide in the PRI to say, if we are to advise on a practical expedient, maybe let's advise against it, pending what the information says, because of what we generally want to do with the wet lease. Also, just recognition, derecognition is a little lot.
Let me put also a pin on it. So those that are a friend of Asen, they will know that when he asks for review of accounting policies, task, there's always one point that he loves. So there is one point that he loves. What is that point? I know that a lot of candidates used to think it was big English back then, but I think I see there's been some adjustment over the years. What is that? What is that thing that he talks about? No, not that. The other one. The other one. When you are reviewing,
Professional judgment. Professional judgment.
The things that when you are reviewing, you just see other people doing it, and you have to stop and say what is, like those things that people just throw in, like it's like a fancy term for dumping. What is that? Do you remember it?
Is it boilerplate accounting?
Yes. Why would OTA have an accounting policy for wet leases if this is the first list that they're getting? So which policy will they be referring to? Because this is the first one. They've just told you this is the first one. So we can't have it in our policy. Otherwise, I will challenge you to say, but your policy was dealing with things that didn't exist. So we can't look at our policy, and that's why I'm saying context. So it is generally the case we look at accounting policy, but here this is the first time we're doing this. So if this policy exists, then I'm going to challenge the CFO for having a policy when they didn't have a similar transaction before. And why else will I challenge this concept of policy? Now I'm going technical. I'm going technical with you. Why will I not be comfortable with Sunday's response of accounting policy if I was in his team? What technical? Let's read paragraph 15 carefully. It says what? Does it say in accordance with our accounting policy? Oh, no, wait, sorry. No, that's a mistake. Sorry. Let me leave that point. Yes. But do you see that here the issue is we will not refer to an accounting policy. But because we don't have an accounting policy, we will want to do what? We might want to draft an accounting policy after this if this is something that is going to be relevant for management. But even more, one of the things that we need to then do, because there's an election, elections are not for us as entry-level chartered accountants, they're for management. So we will need only to raise it to management. So we need to raise this election to management. That's you demonstrating competence. That's you demonstrating competence. Raise the fact that there is an election to management. Does that make sense?
Rendani, I just have a question. Let's say, for example, you are doing this task and they're going to also request you to maybe do journals, right?
Yeah.
And then now if you just raise that there's an election that you can make, does it not put you in an open-ended position, not knowing what are you going to do with the journals? I can, let's say, for example, right now, you told management that, oh, by the way, we can elect to adopt the practical expedient.
Yeah.
Then after that, now they still want you to journalize the initial journals, maybe, for example, right?
Yes.
Now,
yes,
if
yes.
you have just said, if you have just told them that, oh, by the way, there's an election that you can make. Now you are sitting on the other end of the fence and you're like, okay, how should I account for this transaction? Should I combine them in accordance with the practical expedient, or should I split them? You know, maybe I'm just asking, you know.
I don't know, and I hear you, right, where you're coming from. But now, because that sounds like a different task altogether, I'll say this, that you've got an option to apply the practical expedient or don't. But since you asked me for journals, I've now provided you with two sets to say that if you decided to apply, this is how it would look like. And if you decided not to take advantage of that election, this is how it is. So that for me will then be the best way to respond to the question that you have just posed to me.
Rendani, just a follow-up. Now I want to ask, maybe, would it maybe be better to say that if, let's say, the CFO is coming down with the story, and then you see that the practical expedient could apply, wouldn't it be maybe a value add to maybe just inform him to say that, you know what, there's a practical expedient that can be applied to such transactions, therefore I have applied it, and this would be the accounting, unless if he then says that the company has elected not to use the practical expedient. Would it maybe not be a better approach? I'm just wondering and thinking.
So because here I'm responding to your task, you asked for journals. So here I might want to then be mindful of time to say, one, as I said, give the CFO both of the journal sets, where I will therefore have helped him to think through what picture they might want. That's it. But now, for me, there was a potential to now demonstrate higher level application, to say, yeah, there is an application, but I see that you are concerned about these aspects. For me, it might make sense so that this becomes more useful to you, and so on and so on. So that will then be something in addition, and it will be more than what they might have asked for. As an entry-level chartered accountant, some of this decision will be made by the audit committee. The CFO might go there and recommend, but the audit committee might need to sign off on this accounting policy. So do you see the chain? That you, as an entry level, you are not at a point to then decide. Having two journal entry will then help the CFO and the audit committee to make that call. But now let's talk about HLA. What now, if you were now sitting in this position, what do you think will be more useful to the CFO? To combine or by therefore apply the practical expedient, or not to apply the practical expedient?
Sorry,
yes.
To bring it. Sorry. So Rendani, maybe part of the HLA there, I'll bring the business acumen. So
yes,
I will address the cost and the flexibility element here, to remind the CFO that the objective of this wet lease is the cost and that, and I'll support that with the Fs. I'll say for comparative. So I'll advise to elect basically here.
But guys, you guys, are you gonna think like this when you're at psych? Because this is the kind of thinking that I love. You are not moving away from cost. You are bringing your business acumen, and you are in context. And the key word there, lady, is I'm doing this exercise so that at some point on some Excel, I could say, these are the payments for my dry list, these are the payments for this, but I can clearly see that, hey, no, this supplier for these additional services, if I'm to do it with my existing supplier, I'll be better off. So from an HLA perspective and that value add, the CFO might not have been thinking about this. He might have been thinking about the technical, but now you've taken it a step up to say that this, from a comparative perspective, my suggestion will be to do this. So this is brilliant. Yes.
Yes. Yes, I understand what the previous speaker said. And,
yes.
But I think on the PRI, we shall have done our research and maybe get what is sort of other entities treat this wet lease. And then in our advice, I think we should maybe put it in to say, because when we have a situation whereby we need to elect or choose between the two best alternative, there's an element of biasness in our selection, because we'll want the one that will obviously give us maybe a sort of advantage in terms of financial outlook. And I think we need to balance between that and the fair presentation in terms of how are we presenting it? Is it what is done? Is it outside there in terms of, because as you rightfully say that there's no policy, this is a new thing, but there are other entities that are doing this thing. We needed to go out and see how are they treating this thing, so that when we come to our side, even though we have to look at ourselves to say how will it then benefit us, but what about fair presentation out there? I think for me it sort of also brings the issue of ethics to say, are we choosing this because of is the most appropriate way to treat it, or are we choosing it because of it brings the element of financial benefit in terms of the outlook of our maybe financial performance or our financial position. So also for me, it gives that uncertainty to say, when I have to elect, what is it that I should look at? Look at the entity which I represent, or look at the fair presentation, as well as sort of, how is it gonna play out for the entity that I represent? If maybe I can be assisted on that, I think I'll be fine.
Yeah. So John, I will not hold a view that the standard will create an option that creates bias, if you think about it. Otherwise, because that's fundamentally what the standard does. It's supposed to deal with bias. It's supposed to bring comparability. It's supposed to bring value add, useful information useful for decision making. So it will become questionable to then say that wherever the standard has provided an election, and management is taking that election, then there could be a bias in it. So I'll find it a little bit difficult to swallow, to just say that, yeah, but this is the standard. They are saying you can do this. And if now I'm selecting and I've got a reason, because even the companies are saying that there are other companies, they will have considered their context and made a call. So looking at other companies without understanding what context did they consider, and we just simply adopt that becomes an issue. But what this point that Larry has just raised is that he has now presented the context of our CFO is concerned about cost. So if they are to make an election, they will need to remember the big picture of they need to be able to manage, compare this cost. And they are not getting out from the standard. They are therefore not bringing a bias. They are simply making an election. So that's where I will be coming from, to say the practical experience, they are really intended to smooth or streamline the preparation of financial statements, but in themselves not to create any bias. Okay? Then
sorry, Randani.
Sure.
Can I just get clarity on a question? Sorry, I had my hand up, but I see that people have just been unmuting while we're on this point.
Rejoice. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, with gray areas like this, right? For example, the practical expedient, the substitution rights. I think you mentioned that before, and then there was also that other one with that 18 months for renewal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's where a decision must be made as to, are they electing the practical expedience? You know, I think with the substitution rights one, it's something that I'm supposed to do on my end to sort of say, are we in the lease? So maybe let me leave it out. But then on the aspect of on time, right, with the 18 months for renewal now, in terms of, are we using 18 months or 3 months? So with such gray areas, I don't know if you can maybe just give some guidance here on the approach in terms of, is it an area that, am I supposed to question it? Am I putting it as a point, as part of my response? Or, because I saw when I was watching the SICA video in terms of the solution, so one of the candidates actually applied judgment where it pertains to that 18 marks to say, not 18 marks, 18 months to say, they applied their own judgment to say the period should be 3 years. So how do I then see that, okay, here I'm supposed to apply judgment myself, conclude, and move on with my response, or this is something I'm supposed to question as to why it's not here, or this is something that I'm supposed to put down as a consideration that we should also consider in the company? Thanks.
Fair enough. Sure. We will get there shortly. But I understand where you're coming from. But I think what we need to remember, like we said for this point, we are an entry-level CA. So we should not forget that. So and remember, we are also not going to use this as a defense for not applying ourselves, but we will just make sure that we are on the suggestion side. We are not then saying this is the final aspects. All right, so we will then do what? We are now on paragraph 13. So let's just go through then quickly paragraph 13 to say, what does it talk to? It then talks to us to say, for a contract that contains a lease component and one or more additional lease or non-lease components, a lessee shall allocate the consideration in the contract to each lease component on the basis of the relative standalone selling prices and the aggregate standalone price of what? Of the non-lease components. The relative standalone price shall be determined on the same basis of the price the lessor or a similar supplier will charge an entity for that component or similar component separately. If an observable standalone price is not readily available, the lessee shall estimate the standalone selling price, maximizing the use of observable information. So now we are at a very interesting place we've got the pilots, we've got the crews, we've got so many elements that has been given them. And we need to separate, right? So the principle here is that we need to separate the payment now. Do you think that there will be difficulty with separating the payments? Do you think that there will be difficulty with separating the payments? Talk to me just as to why.
I think it will be difficult. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. My explanation would be, let's talk about the cost that relates to payment of staff, maybe pilots.
Yeah.
It's not readily available in the market.
Is it not?
I can't go to the stock market.
Wait.
And find out.
No, wait, can you not go and hire a pilot? Are you sure you cannot? Because you did the research. So are you telling me we cannot go and hire a pilot? Like in this research, can you not go and hire a pilot? Are you saying it will be impossible to determine a standalone selling price for this?
No, I'm not saying it will be impossible. It's possible you can hire a pilot, but the cost is not readily available.
Are you sure? Because you had 5 days of research. You are saying that if you want a pilot, you cannot get a pilot by simply Googling. You cannot get service provider that provide pilot services. Is that what you're telling me? Because now remember that it's a context assessment, this one. And you are in a PRI. You are not being subjected to this under exam. You are now being given an opportunity to think through this and research a little bit more.
Because I remember in pre-release there was this a company ACMI or something. It was providing the same services, but we didn't get the costs there. But
remember, we don't need the cost. We just need to know that it can be obtained. Yes. Because that's what we just want to know, that it can be obtained. So can it be obtained from other suppliers or similar suppliers? Yes or no?
And yes, I see it dropped, but yeah. So yes, we actually have the info internally, right? So other services, we have them through the dry list.
Yes, yes. And that was another context. Context, guys. We do have the dry lease arrangement. We do, and this is for the similar aircraft. They even said is the Airbus 320. And what else, Larry? What else can we pick from the context that we have?
For me, you can correct me. I think it's the only one is the aircraft, right? So if it's different to what we have, so that will be the balancing figure, basically, because other services we have, the pilots, the crew, all the services basically we have from the dry lease, but the aircraft itself. So for me, that will be the more the balancing figure if it's different to what we already have in-house.
Yeah, but for me, I thought because they are already leasing similar aircraft, that could be a similar supplier. Because remember, they've got a similar aircraft that they are leasing.
Okay, so I'll look at the cost that we do not have control over. So that will be your insurance. That will be your maintenance.
And insurance, I'm thinking that insurance you can also simply get.
Yes, we get a quotation cost that potentially might slightly differ from what we currently have in house. So that's on the cost that we do not have control over. Those are the ones that I'll source externally.
Yeah, but that's what this requirement wants. It wants you to consider the standalone selling price, the one that you will pay to external people. And I'm saying that you already have a dry lease arrangement. Insurance we can easily get. What about maintenance from the context? What about
maintenance? We can get as well, because with the dry lease arrangement, we do have maintenance for the similar aircrafts, right?
And are we doing the maintenance ourselves, or is someone external doing it? What did the context say?
You'll need help there because the first time doing the paper, so yeah.
It's not acceptable to me, Larry. You can't be doing this for the first time here. You've had this for a long time, but let's leave that. So third part, we are told that it's outsourced in the PRI. But I'm saying that this is the work you are doing in the PRI. You guys are coming in with about 5 indicators for just being thorough. I mean, this is the responses. This is what the examiners want. But I'm saying that you are passing this task before you even come in. And imagine, we are still at initial recognition. It's like we are not even trying. It's like, do you see how context and technical, when they are married, they make you a super professional? Like we have not read, but imagine if this was my file and I'm coming in and I've got answers. I've brought in context and I've brought technical in. I am not assuming anything that I had the opportunity to get during PRI. These are indicators now coming in. And I've not done much. I'm still on initial recognition. I've not even spoken about the list terms yet. But do you see the power of effective and critical analysis? Because I saw in when you completed that form, you said you want critical analysis in the PRI, and this is what I want you to have. I want you to see how to get that C before you even walk in. There was nothing that was going to surprise you about this CFO, given the level of critical thinking we are taking. Do we see this? Yes.
You see, this is my frustration with APC.
Why is that? I didn't expect something like that, but sure, let me hear. What is the frustration? Sure.
The things that we wrote there, they're in my file. But you go on the day, the CFO, the man goes left, complete, pure incompetent. So you start thinking, can he really be this incompetent? Or maybe Cycle is trying to play tricks with me. So that's how I'll get thrown off, you know?
Yeah, to be honest, I wanted to criticize. I actually did criticize it, and I said, no, CFO, it can't be. I mean, I want to look at your books for dry leases if you can make this kind of mistakes. That's what I asked for, to say, can I look at this dry lease? I know I've just come in, but I'm now worried about what you're doing. Like, how can you mess it up so much? So for me, that was me coming and saying, I want to demonstrate that ethical leadership. Remember, ethical leadership has got professional citizenship, personal ethics, as well as what it's got citizenship, professional ethics, as well as business ethics. But I'm saying that I will not be fine if my CFO is giving me this quality of work and I don't ask for other work that they've done on similar arrangement, because I didn't expect there to be so many mistakes. So for me, ethical leadership, I demonstrated that way, to say, give me your dry lease arrangement so that I just look and see that all is in good order. Obviously, I was nice so that I don't look arrogant or I don't criticize my boss.
Brendan, just a quick one. On the same issue.
Yes. When you say same issue, which one?
Okay, on the ethics side, it's clear that the CFO is classified the work list operating list, which is incorrect. How do I put it across, like on the ethics side? How do I say, okay, this is a lack of technical competence? Like, how do I express that?
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that for me, I will be nice to say that. Yeah, no, it seems that There were a number of errors that needed to be addressed, but I have done my best in order to just unpack and also put those suggestions that you wanted in order to make sure that should we enter into future wet leases, we do get them right. But given that some of the things are applicable to dry leases, I would like for an opportunity to review that to just make sure that there are no errors there that we might have had oversight over. So just to be nice, just to say it was an oversight, even though these mistakes are really concerning me.
Yeah, because my concern is basically if this was from a junior, I would recommend like, okay, if for
Yes,
person.
yes.
Now
Yeah.
this is the CFO. How
Yeah.
do I like really like put him by the into the corner?
Yeah, but for me, as I'm saying, that I would present it as an oversight to him, as Blessing is saying that I will be worried about the department, even though it's him. So that's another way to put it, to say I'm worried about the finance department. So that will be that. So yeah, but at least, yeah, yes. Then there's also an IS 8 that we might need to look into it just to make sure there's a need to correct any prior period error. But there could be a number of ways. But I'll want you not to not be silent, because being silent just talks about not neglecting your professional responsibility. And that's where ethics will be coming from for me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. But here we are. Now let's take now a little bit step in. And then we'll take a break, say in 10 minutes. Yes. Yeah.
Randan, I'm so sorry to take you back, but this is just in general.
Yes.
You know, the issue I hear you are always speaking about context, but ever since there was this other paper that I tried, I think it's a 2022 paper. So, you know, they were speaking about list modifications, you know. So then I went and then I looked up list modifications and all those things. I know this is something different. I'm just trying to understand, how does one ensure that they cover themselves very well? So they spoke about list modifications. You look at IFRS 16 list modifications and things like that. Then you come and then you look at the IOD. And then when you look at the IOD, they start speaking about, I can't remember, I think they were talking about the reassessment of the, you know, of the list liability. And now you're like, okay, if this was the exam, I would have been thrown off because I would have only prepared for list modification and not maybe things like the change in whether they are going to buy the asset and things like that. How does one make sure that you don't find yourself in an find yourself wanting and in an open position?
All right, sure. So the first part will be this, because here, as you can see, we are now sitting at a paragraph called separating list components. And we have now dealt with 12, and in 12, they spoke about 32 and 33. We went there. Now we have dealt with 13, 14, 15. You see that? And then we've already addressed 16. So now I have covered myself on list components. So if the examiner then becomes creative enough to go somewhere here, then they caught me. But I'm saying that what I can just do in the PRI period is just to be thorough and make sure that all grounds are covered. They should not be where now I'm saying there is an issue about separating components, and there are paragraphs that I'm not dealing with, and I don't have a basis for excluding them. If I've got a basis for excluding, then I need to say why. Like, for instance, we are not going to talk about 17. Why? Because the subheading is lessor, and we are coming in as a lessee. So I don't think I will need to be worried about this. So that is something that I can leave out, but I have a reason for leaving out. But the others, if I say, how come you didn't know about this? Then it will be very difficult for me to justify why I didn't then do what? I didn't address all these 5 paragraphs plus B32 under this separating list components heading. Does that make sense? So it's just building that thoroughness.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi. Sorry.
Yes.
Can I interject quickly? There's just one thing that I want maybe your guidance on, because I've been struggling a lot with that. You know, where you're saying that one, you must understand your audience. So my perspective will be CFO is somebody that is a qualified CA, probably with so many years of experience. And then you come to a point where there's so many errors in terms of the you know, the information that he has prepared and all that.
Yeah.
When now dealing with the, you know, the answer, the of the perspective that you now need to give a guidance and solution to the problems that you are seeing, how far or how detailed do you go? Because my struggle is on balancing on that, to say I'm speaking to a person who is qualified. Do I now even have to go and define certain things in terms of definitions? Because at some point we're saying that when you're speaking to a qualified person like that, you must understand that they can actually even go to the standard and read. So what level of details do I need to go into now to addressing what they did wrong here? And
Yes. Yeah,
the second point, so the second point is on, let's say, where the information is prepared. He's presenting it to me, but saying it has been done by somebody junior to him. And then they say, okay, address the or give this person that has done this work on my behalf a coaching note and guidance. And then when I address the information now, addressing it to the person rather than him, then it seems as though I misunderstood my audience. Can you guide on that? Because it becomes a problem when you have a review of a work that has been done by somebody else, but presented by somebody else.
Yeah. So for me, the idea is it's exactly that, to say that, let's say you're talking to me as well, but you're talking to me about tax matters. I will want you to not say Rendani is a CA, therefore he will understand these things. And I will want you to unpack them for me and give me the opportunity not to go through the standard to the legislation because I don't necessarily believe you, but because I am wanting or looking to just further my understanding about a particular issue. So it should not be a situation where you then have to quote the standard or the legislation for me, but it will be to a point where you are able to raise any problems that I might have made. That's number one, in a technical, competent manner. So you need to be correcting me, not based on your own view, because this is not MAF. This is not your thinking. It's the standard thinking. So I need to be convinced that you are challenging what I've done based on the standard. So you need to then have a very, very delicate balance of the principles that are in the standard coming through. And that is how you'll then be able to build your depth. So that is how you'll then be able to build your depth, because you are now saying that, and we'll make an example, because we're not going to go through the entire task, but we'll make an example to just say, here, when I'm raising this point, I'm going to clarify why I don't agree, but whether this is going to be written by Rendani or whether it's going to be written by Polos or any other professional or candidate, we are going to say this we believe because it is using the standard as a basis. Not we believe because Rendani said it, not we believe because this candidate said it. So that's what you want to always do. For me, that is the best way to just ensure that what you've got a response that can accommodate different people. And the reality is that sometimes you can do that, but your CFO still calls you in the room to unpack things. That's very common. You can do that, and your CFO says, let's go to the board meeting. You'll just need to log in when we have to present this memo, but after that, you may exit. So that is something that is quite common. So generally, we would like to believe that, what do you call it? That someone who is a CA and they will always have what? They will always have technical knowledge about all these things that we study, but that's not the reality. Things just fade over time based on our focus. But the fact that there's then the difference between technical competence and technical knowledge. So technical knowledge fades, but technical competence does not fade. Meaning that if for whatever reason I cannot find my certificate and SAICA says, now you need to come back, then I'm like, okay, what do I have? I no longer have the technical competence for the tax legislation, but I have technical competence. I can restudy these things and then do what? And then hopefully pass again this assessment. So I've lost my technical knowledge, but I've not lost my technical competence. Because competence is the ability to apply, to have a systematic approach, and so on and so on. So that's why when you talk, you are now acknowledging that your CFO has got some accounting. Yes, they've messed up, but they will then be able to connect with it. So that is the idea there. All right, so quickly, just to talk here. Regarding the wet list opportunity I referred to last week, I've attached 2 attachments. The salient terms, but we then saw the examiner do what? Do this. Which competency were they talking to? Do you remember those 9 competencies? Changes and additions since the previous versions are included in the underlined text. Did you see that the examiner then was testing our ability to adapt to changes on the day? They were looking for that. And now why those competencies are important? So SAICA holds the view that it is difficult for us to give someone a C who is not demonstrating adaptability to changes on the day. So they used to hold that view very strongly. And I don't think they've changed, to say that if your response did not deal with the things that are underlined here, then a C becomes very elusive. It will slip out of your hands just like that. So if you found yourself to say, I had a very comprehensive discussion because I was able to give the things I researched during the PRI, but I was surprised to be a BC, I was surprised to be an LC. It's because the things that are underlined here, you didn't get to deal with. You will not fare well against a competent strawman if you don't attend to this. So when I came in, I then knew that despite me having all this, this research, because the research I've done with the things that were available to me then, I am now saying that this competence tells me that what? Let me just note it. It might be difficult or impossible to secure a C without due consideration of the underlying aspects. That's it. And you therefore need to do what? You need to say, am I surprised? Am I surprised about this? Am I surprised about the additional information? Did I not reach a conclusion? Did I not reach a conclusion without them? Because if I have, then I need to amend, because that's what these competencies say. It then says, what am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? There is no way that it will be there and you're not supposed to do. So that's what I want you to start doing, to say anything given in the IOD it needs me to adapt to changes. So I am not going to do well, and I'm not going to say time has run out without having considered these aspects. Agreed? So now it means that here, and shame, they love a presence on the day. That's what they call presence on the day. They love this. If then we have two indicators, one we could have gotten before the on the day and the one on the day, even though the on the day is simple, it has a little bit of weighting, greater weighting compared to a point that you could have come up with before the assessment. So now let's just then show up. So we are saying that all these other things we saw. Now let's deal with this underlined item. We have Can you hear me?
Yes, Randan, you can hear you. We just lost the presentation.
All right, let's bring it back. So as I was saying, that the idea now becomes, let's talk about what? Let's talk about the underlined aspect. Just one or two, and it will address Rejoice's question before we go. So now, one, they are saying what? The lessor is entitled to 18-month fixed monthly payments paid in arrears for the use of the aircraft and all related goods and services. So one of the things that you will then have what? You will have then done during a PRI, and you will have thought about the lease term. And initially, you might have been of two minds to say this flexibility that OTA wants to achieve, that could mean that it might enter into relatively short lease terms, such that we now have a short-term lease. And in some cases, you might then have maybe done some research and said, typically these wet lease agreements are minimum of 2 years, 18 months, and so on and so on. But you will have had uncertainty about that. You will not have had enough information to conclude. But now when you are here, you are able to conclude that you don't have what? You don't have a short-term lease. Because a short-term lease is what? A short-term lease is a lease with a period less than 12 months. So we don't have it. So do I tell the examiners about it or do I not? So that might depend, because at this point I've not looked at the memo, but now I've come to conclude. Then they are saying a variable payment calculated as 0.5 of total revenue generated by the lessee from operating the aircraft during what? The lease term. This calculation is to be completed within 2 months from 30 June and is payable by 31 August 2025. So now what are the issues here? What are the issues? What are the issues?
It's not a lease payment.
No. Guys, no. I said I don't accept such things. No. It's not a lease, no. No. Give me more.
I think no. The issue...
Yes. Give me the issue. Yes.
in the issues like that, like we have a variable payment, but however, it is not linked to any rate or index. So we might not need to consider it when we calculate our contract liability.
All right, so issue one is this payment a lease pay? Is this payment a lease payment or not? That's issue number one. Issue number two,
how do we treat
not-
it?
Yes. So this is it. This is it. So now you've given me the answer. So now there is a variable lease payment, and maybe because now we've got the benefit of hindsight, we see what? We see that our CFO has not attended to this, right? I will have given them an NC, our CEO, CFO man, yes. Yeah, this is an NC response. All right, so now we are then saying, because now we are doing a review of the accounting memo, right? How do you bring this in? Maybe because we have not spoken about now writing a point out. We know these are the issues. We have now reviewed the accounting memo. Now, how do you bring these issues into the mix? Remember what we said about review. We said review, you do what? What are you looking for in a review? What are you looking for when you're doing a review? Number one?
Errors and omissions.
There's a problem.
Yes, you've got errors, technical errors, let's put them as such. You've got technical errors. And then number two, you have?
What is missing?
Yeah, what is missing? And you have?
You look for what is correct.
Correct treatment.
Correct treatment is technical errors.
Reasonability of assumptions.
So reasonability of assumptions. Thank you. All right. So now this thing, what did the CFO say about this when we are busy reviewing the memo? What did the CFO say about this variable payment? What is the CFO saying about this variable lease payments?
Andani, is it not the 0.5% of total revenue? Then what's the basis of 0.5%?
And remember, this is a lease term. This is an agreement. We challenging it at this point might not be so much because it is the agreement that has been presented. What did they say? Is it the one signed, or is it the one, or is the proposed? The proposed, we might then, if we are not happy about something, we might challenge it from a strategy to say, no, based on my research, 0.5 is too much. And therefore, maybe before we eventually sign, let's negotiate this further. But now let's be in where our accounting heads, and we are busy reviewing this accounting memo. And I'm saying that, what did the CFO do about this variable payment that exists in this contract? What did they say about it? What did they say? So, yeah.
And then is this a trick question? What did they say in the pre-release or in the
in the accounting memo? How did the CFO treat? Yes.
To be expensed.
No. What did the CFO do? That's what my question. What did the CFO do about this payment? What did the CFO? Here's the accounting memo. So they said what? Similarly, the variable lease payment will be calculated based on revenue over the lease term and expensed when it is paid at the end of 2025. Were they lying? Were they lying?
Yeah, this one was interesting because I think the standard says that.
They're all interesting, kind. But let's go. Yes. What do you find interesting about this one? Yes.
I think the standard says when the variable payments are paid, right? Then what's the thing? That's when you will actually expense it. But then you start thinking about the accrual basis of accounting to say that shouldn't you be expensing it when it is in a way accord?
And I'm very happy with that. Like, do you see now that as the CFO, I'm now ashamed that I didn't even know the accrual basis, and you have now applied it to me. So I am clear what I have missed here. So thank you for that. So do you see what is happening or what he just dealt with? Reading this critically, you can clearly see that the CFO, the point number one, we were talking about how to treat this. Point number two, it is now about, so it was the nature first. Then point number two, it is the treatment. And the CFO is saying when it is paid at the end of August 2025. But Kanye is now saying that this is inconsistent with the accrual basis of accounting. And for doing that, you have now what? You have picked up a technical error with how this item has been accounted for. And you are now dealing with the IOD. So if a C is a smile, it's starting to draw up to say we are getting there, because you are now showing presence on the day. Are we clear about that? Are we clear? That's it. All right. And can you maybe talk to me about the journal? How will this journal look like? So let me just put that point down, because just to say, the expensing of the variable payment when it is paid is incorrect, since it is inconsistent with the accrual basis of accounting. We need to raise or recognize an expense as and when it is incurred. All right, so that point is in. But now talk to me about the journal. Well, how will the journal look like?
I might be wrong, but I'm just thinking maybe you'll debit the lease expense, and then after that I'll just create a receivable. Maybe I might call it.
Wait. Talk to me. So you will create a credit as a receivable?
No, I mean a liability.
A liability that has been paid when?
In August.
When are you doing this? Just show me with this debit and credit. When are you doing it?
On the 30th of June.
Which 30th of June?
2025.
So tell me, you are doing it on the 30th of June 2025.
It's a provision, sure.
So talk to me about this. So when you say it's a provision, what is then why is it not a liability? Talk to me about that.
And then it's the same thing. It's a provision in December though, but because the financial year is December, it will be a provision for 12 months. Yes, and
so this provision, when is it arising though? When do we have this provision?
In December, Rendani, because the variable percentage of the total revenue, you can estimate that based on the revenue accumulated through this transaction from January when you entered into this transaction until December, then you can estimate the provision, the 0.5% on the total revenue as at December, and raise that as your credit there.
So maybe let's just present some weird scenario. So what if is for some weird reason you want to terminate this arrangement in November? Will you have had an obligation by then or not?
You have the obligation, Rendani, from when you sign the contract, according to that point too. So it's just about when you have to pay that. So which is 31st August. But it's for 18 months.
No. What are you saying? You and I, we should not be saying that we had an obligation when we signed the contract, right? You and I, we should not be saying that. Because we know better now, right?
No, in this scenario, yes, you're saying you and I, you're referring to the finance analyst in this case.
No. I'm talking about you, lady, knowing that we've spoken about some other cases before where we clarified that signing an agreement does not give rise to a liability. This part, I'm hoping that you remember us talking about that. Noktula, yes.
Okay.
Think about it. I'm going to come back.
Hi, Rendani. I'm going to try, but don't you need an obligating event?
So, and what is the obligating event here?
So the obligating event for me would be, it says that it needs to be completed within 2 months from 30 June 2025. So I'm thinking our obligating event will now be correct from the 30th of June 2025.
I'm not convinced. Give it another shot. What gives rise to this liability? Is it the calculation thereof, or is it the liability itself? What gives rise to this liability?
Rendani, can I come in?
Yes.
The bullet point, it says a variable payment calculated as 0.5% of total revenue generated by the lessee from operating aircraft during the lease term. So the obligating event is the operating the aircraft from the 31st of January 2024 up to the end of the lease term, which is the 18 months, right? So for me, that will be the obligating event, like the use of the aircraft during the lease term, basically.
I love that, Cindy. But so if I operate and there's no one, do I have an obligation?
You must generate a revenue because
yes, I want you to then put it together. Yes, that's the only thing you were missing.
Yes,
so,
yeah, okay.
so Cindy's point is on point right there to say the obligating event is operating the aircraft. It's not the calculation that is going to give rise to this. It's not the signing. So if for whatever reason we sign but we don't operate, then we're not going to generate revenue and we're not going to have to pay anything. And the fact that we are not going to calculate, or we're not going to be ready to calculate, or the lesson is going to be delayed by calculation, does not mean we don't have an obligation. So the obligation arises when we operate the aircraft and generate revenue. Why is that important? And Cindy clarified that there will be an obligation that arises from January 2024. Which is a month after we've operated for the first one. Why is this important for a timeline? Why is this important? And it will be important for doing this entry that Kanye has just given us.
So much.
Why will this be important? What other consideration does it give rise to? What other consideration does
unwinding of the provision, I guess, as you incur your revenue?
Yeah, but before we unwind, we have to do what first? You skip the step. Before we unwind, we have to
recognize the value at where the obligating event occur.
So there might need to be present value since there is a 12-month period, and the discounting effects might be significant. Because the one we accrue on 31 Jan, it is going to be paid in more than 12 months. Then Feb 1, more than 12 months. But do you see that this thing was a little bit tricky? It was a little bit hidden tricky, Yana. So that you needed to be present enough to be able to see the journals, raise the issues, and be present to unpack them. Does this make sense? What are you thinking about, Shoni? All right. Yes.
This CFO, where did they do the about course? I mean, I think they should have gone through and I'm with this Seagull guy, But yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. All
right. Thank you, Cindy, for unpacking that for us. But do you see that being present? I mean, this is what generates credits. This is what gives you that C. And as I'm saying, because we are dealing with things we are seeing for the first time, examiners are very impressed with us. Are we all clear? So this for me will then have demonstrated that that 12 months. So the last thing then to Rejoice's question. So Rejoice, you asked that now there is this 18-month that was referred to as part of the renewal. And you are saying that what was the expectation? Is the expectation for you to conclude, give suggestion, and so on?
That's what I did last week, so why am I doing it again?
So essentially, what you needed to do, Rejoice, about this, you will then need to consider the terms of the standard or the principles in the standard. The principles in the standard talk about what? The principles in the standard talk about whether there is an economic incentive to renew. That's the key word that it uses. So that is the key word that it uses. The what? The economic incentive to renew. So here, it could go either way. It could go either way. So you might then show some brilliance by trying to compare some of the cost or the amounts that have been given, because now you've been given. No, it was given later on in the other task E. That here, because you didn't have an amount, you might want to just clarify on what basis, keeping context into account, you will what? You will renew. And bringing the point from Larry, the one he shared earlier, will be brilliant, because he will then say that the objective of this arrangement is to manage our cost. Once we have done a detailed cost analysis, we might be able to establish whether it does make financial sense to continue or not. If it does, we will then include this 18 months because it will be reasonably certain that we will renew. Otherwise, we might not, and therefore we will do what? We will then keep it to 18 months. That could be one example. The other, you might talk about that given that there is an opportunity that we want to explore with this route, having this flexibility might then give us an opportunity to renew as we assess whether a route will be beneficial or not. So there could be a number of things that you raise, but at the end of the day, what you just needed to demonstrate was your business acumen as well as your understanding of the technical, which is considered the economic incentive. So as long as you are clear about your thinking process, this indicator will have been in. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So let's take that break. I see it's 12 o'clock. So let's take that break. It's 12:05 on my side. Then let's do 15 minutes. Let's be back at 20 past. Yeah, let's be back at 20 past. Then we will look at task. We'll then look for the last 10 minutes to half past. We'll then just talk about that 9 competencies, and then we'll jump to task E. And when we talk about the strategic consideration, we will then just talk about it in general for both tasks. But then now, task E is particularly interesting. And sadly enough, when we did our script review on task E, only 6% of the candidates had passed this task. And so I want you to be present for it. So drink water, take a walk, but let's be present, because if we then received 300 scripts to review and only 6%, what's 6%? Is it 18 students? So that's the problem for us. And I don't want us to continue with that problem. So we will need to be present when we discuss E and understand what is it that examiners expect from us. So 20 past, let's be back. Thank you.
Sorry, Rindani, can I quickly ask a question?
But let's release everyone.
Okay.
Sure, yeah.
No, sorry, my hand was up, but I don't think you saw. I just wanted to confirm on the obligating event, did you say it's operating the leased aircraft and earning revenue, or only operating the aircraft?
Both. Because what I was saying is, so, and one could be technical with it, that economically speaking, what does operating the aircraft mean? Can you instruct the lessee or the lessor to say that the aircraft is currently in Durban, bring it back to Joburg or Tambo without anyone on it? Is that a practicality? Because if we don't consider that to be a practicality, then the two cannot be separated. In other words, you cannot operate without earning revenue. But sometimes I hear that aircrafts have to move from one place, and sometimes they don't have anyone. Sometimes I don't know why. But if one then just say, economically speaking, the two are intertwined to say that when you operate, you will be generating revenue. One could therefore say that the core thing, it's therefore what? Operating. And therefore one will not necessarily penalize you for not bringing the generation of revenue part.
Oh, okay. Yes, I understand. Thank you for that.
Sure. All right.
Renton, just a quick one.